All right, I think we're live already. Let me just go to the watch page, make sure that we are. Yep, there we are. Welcome back. I hope that you guys have had a great Friday morning. Yesterday I was on Just My Stupid Opinions page or a live stream for the Ontario election. Go ahead and check out his channel. It's Just My Stupid Opinion, 4 words, all spaced and everything. So, a lot of stuff to cover. I've been doing a lot of writing. Next week, going to be doing a lot of India talk. Next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. Probably going to have a stream on Hard Bastard concerning the Mattis file. And I will say that I think that there is going to be some more progress in exposing this fraud pretty soon, but I thought it wouldn't take this long, so who knows. A lot of what's happened in the past 24 hours, I would say, is a meltdown for the liberal establishment in Canada. They came to power in 2015. They swept out a conservative party over there that had been in power for a while. And I think many people were saying that Justin Trudeau was the vision of the new uber millennial leader, the type that would lead liberalism into, truly the 21st century, sort of like a mega Obama. And the fact is that even though Obama is, he's black, obviously, Trudeau is considered more of an icon because of his open belief in feminism and his belief, a lot of his talk about equality and stuff like that, and virtue signaling at every shot that he can get, going to India wearing those weird outfits, the ones that are, well, they're not weird outfits, they're just local outfits that Indians don't wear day to day, and he's wearing like basically a full-on wedding outfit. It was pretty surreal for a lot of the Indians there, according to accounts I've read, according to people who've told me. Perseus Gold is here. I'm happy to see. I think you watch Hard Bastards, so welcome. You're always welcome to suggest topics for the channel. So, I personally, I don't really know too much about Doug Ford. I do know that he was a Toronto City Councilman for a few years. His brother, Rob, was the mayor of Toronto. I kind of made this, you can see it here. Whoops. You can see this little meme here. I'll enlarge it so you guys can enjoy it a little better. And it shows kind of the evolution of Trudeau's image. Back in 2015, everybody thought, he's like this sexy dude with his, his goatee and the chest that isn't covered in cigarette burns and stuff like that. Well, nowadays, not so much. And you have basically the second coming of Chris Farley upending the regional or the provincial government in Ontario. That's not good news for Mr. Trudeau. Not very good news at all. And it comes at the worst time possible. I think what he wanted, the way he wanted to come into this weekend was to, damn it. Sorry, guys. There's a G7 summit occurring in, I believe it is in Toronto, and Donald Trump is coming to town. Angela Merkel is coming to town. The head of the EU, Juncker, is coming to town, along with Donald Tusk, who's the quote-unquote president of the EU, even though Juncker, who is the bureaucrat, has the real power. You have the president of Italy, or the prime minister of Italy, Conte, is coming to town. You have a lot of these people coming in, and ideally, if they would have had like some good news to show that the liberal establishment is holding serve. If we're going to use the example of a tennis match, they wanted evidence that their backbone remains strong, but it's not going to be that way, because this is possibly the biggest slap in the face that you could get from your own citizens ahead of a major international conference occurring in the most important city in your country. So I don't know if Perseus, I don't know if you live um, in Canada, but let me know. Let me know if you are. Let me know if you voted too. Um, I want to find out. I will talk to some people from California. There were elections last week where, and I know people who are both conservative and not conservative, or like really progressive there. I'll find out if they did vote. So let me know. Um, Perseus Gold. Oh, you are okay. So you are Canadian. I obviously hate that Toronto is an epicenter of this globalist crap, but the police here manage the riots extremely well. Okay, so Perseus, I don't know if today's a good day, but maybe someday if you want, you can come on and explain your side of the election, your thoughts about the NDP also gaining some seats. We did have a long chat yesterday. Arjun, who's also in the chat, has talked about it. He was in the conversation last night about it, and Arjun happens to be from India, and him and I have laughed a lot about Trudeau's visit over there. And you know, I think that there's nothing that brings together people of different backgrounds more than an idiot who thinks that he looks good in in an outfit that he's never worn in his life. You know, somebody like Justin Trudeau. Um, but moving on from there, yeah, Doug Ford is taking power. He'll be sworn in on June 29th. Then he'll, you know, I guess he's going to meet with Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdesel and was asked to form a government after defeating Kathleen Wynne. Okay, so he defeated her and she submitted her resignation, which obviously she doesn't have the option. Should I vote in this poll? I don't know. I don't know if I should. Would that be tampering with the poll? What does everybody say? Geronimo Garcia, thank you for joining. I don't remember you either. We're talking about a lot of Canada, and Perseus Gold says that and our former federal NDP leader from the Punjab associating with rebel groups. Yeah, we did hear about that. We actually talked about that a couple times. Arjun especially was talking about it, and I did find a few articles. I think this was in March I was talking about it. Now that's not necessarily. I don't know if Trudeau is necessarily to blame for this liberal defeat in Ontario so much as the local or the provincial leader, Kathleen Wynne, who a lot of people have said, oh, you know, it's great. She's like the first lesbian prime minister or something. Well, you know, I think I can speak for a lot of men, and this isn't our best trait. When you hear lesbian, but you don't get much from, you know, the title, people lose interest. I don't know if I can put it any better. And that's an honest take, and I'm sorry if I put it that way. But I heard that she was an awful prime minister. She mismanaged a lot of the deals involving their hydroelectric company, and it really did. It caused like a major utility bill rise, and people, doesn't matter what background you're in, whether you're conservative, liberal, centrist, non-political, progressive, people don't appreciate having to pay higher for their electric bill. J-Man Truth Seeker says, I thought Canada was over. Thanks for the great news. Geronimo Garcia says, I am from Argentina. Well, bueno, bienvenido. Bienvenido a mi canal. Estoy dispuesto a hablar de cada tema que quieres. Perseus Gold says, people are sick of the liberals and the NDP playing hardball with Trump because our economy is tied to trade with the U.S. people. People are seeing that this politics first mentality isn't working. Yeah, so I think look, we had a stream yesterday, and I mentioned I don't know if we're going to get through all the topics today. A lot of the topics that I cover, I'm definitely going to cover Venezuela, Nicaragua, a certain nation in the Middle East that starts with a P that people like to talk about, but they don't. The same people don't want to talk about Nicaragua ever. And we're going to talk about the G7. We're going to talk about a certain report that Justin Trudeau groped a female reporter back in 2000. Very ironic if you think about it. Very ironic. The most liberal, the most feminist man in the world. Apparently, he found his kryptonite, which is you know, a woman's body. It just broke his feminism power, and he just became a mortal devil like the rest of us. So people have started to melt down over this story, and I have a couple of funny stories from Vice. This story we'll look at first. What the hell happened to my screen? So this is what Vice puts out now: how cookies, lube, and human immolation fuel San Francisco's best all-female orgy. So I happened to find this woman. She happens to work on this, and you know, we're not going to go through it all, but this is what Vice used to be: an amazing network, amazing stuff about Pakistan. And if that's what they're putting out now, why are they claiming that they're actual media? It's basically, you know, a kinky sex advice newspaper now. You know, wasn't there like some article a few months ago that says guys should really start putting things in their butt or something? So that's what Vice considers newsworthy topics. And they're not newsworthy in a time when they're claiming that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. If you're going to be putting articles like the Queer Woman's Guide to Strap-on Blowjobs, no. And I say that, you know, some people like to ask, why is it that you don't clean up your stream? Hopefully you know, if you did like your stream a little more like straight-laced, put on, you know, like a more business-like apparel, made yourself look more professional or whatever, you'd get more streamers. Understand this. This is what eventually a lot of these media outlets try to do at the same time as they're promoting stories that really don't have anything to do with news. And that's what happened to Vice. So with all due respect, I'll continue to talk as profane as I want. You know, I don't really use racial epithets because I don't feel that way. But I'll continue to say things that I want as long as I can without, you know, obviously without getting banned. But you know, when you have a newspaper like that with Anna Pulley putting out stories like this, then they get into this. It says Doug Ford is going to be Ontario's new premier, and that's not the big one. I think there was a tweet earlier. Let me find it. It's pretty funny. One second. I have to open a new window. 1 second. Let me hide my screen from you assholes. So. You'll see in a second. Sorry for the delay. I should have had this up. But, yeah, here it is. So, again, I have to minimize it. This was Vice's reaction to it. And the actual article, when you read it, doesn't really say much that's really inflammatory or whatever. But it's just the word fuck, but really stretched out. That's what they call, you know, news in Vice. You know, when I first remember Vice becoming big, and it was on YouTube, they were putting out some amazing stories from the Philippines and Pakistan and all over the world. And then now that they became, you know, respectable news, no, the standards have been leveled now. They're actually no better than me. They're no better than anybody in the chat, by the way. Anybody in the chat has probably the same standards as Vice. Let me see here. What are you guys saying? I don't know how you guys found me. Perseus Gold. I think you probably found me from Hard Bastard, but so Geronimo Garcia is saying that Macri doesn't know how to guide his country, and the asshole just did a contract with the FMI. That's probably the International Monetary Fund, and that will cause our very bad economy. You know what? There's a story I'm working on that slightly relates to Argentina, and I know that they do have a toxic bond. You know, bonds that are basically junk now because the country is so far in debt. So maybe I know Perseus is a new viewer, and Geronimo is a new viewer. If you guys want to send me something, I do have Discord. I'll put the Discord address in the chat once I hide the screen again like a dick. 1 second. Sorry. You guys can send me topics. I'll either cover it or you guys can come on. You guys can talk about the problems in your country. I think every country has plenty of problems. Even Trump. People like Trump, but he's no perfect person. Of course, I'm not gonna tempt fate like Anthony Bourdain. People are saying that he tempted fate with his whole shit. 1 second. Yeah, he also insulted Donald Trump. Ended up committing suicide. Very weird situation. I think the whole world's like really blowing that story out of proportion. So we talk about Doug Ford and Ontario and the exaggerated reaction by Vice, which of course tells people like stories about queer sex with strap-ons or something. So I don't know. You guys can tell me which way you want me to vote in this poll. Did Ontario make the right decision? So it's yes, no, or maybe, because Canada can't be decisive enough. I mean, maybe they should just have an option. I didn't vote and I don't give a fuck. That would be a more normal one. So I'll check in the chat in a second. Now the other issue is Trudeau. It says Canada's pinup PM was accused of groping a woman at a music festival 2 decades ago. The self-proclaimed feminist politician, I want to accept cookies, apologized to a female reporter after inappropriately handling her at the event in Creston, British Columbia in 2000. A local newspaper in British Columbia first published the allegation in 2000, alleging that the Canadian PM had behaved inappropriately toward one of their female reporters. The editorial published in the Creston Valley Advance says the then 28-year-old Trudeau apologized to their journalist for handling her at the Kokanee Summit Festival. Self-proclaimed feminist Trudeau has made, and the Sun is rubbing it in. I think the Sun is a little more. It's not as much of a liberal paper as the Toronto Star, but I'm not from Canada, so I mean maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just hate him. Has made a big deal of his pro-women credentials, forming Canada's first gender-balanced cabinet when he became Prime Minister in 2015. His press secretary Matt Pescuzzo said Trudeau has always treated women with respect, and that he doesn't think he had any negative interactions while in Creston. In the article, Canada's pinup prime minister was accused of groping the reporter during the music festival. He reportedly told the journalist, I'm sorry. I can't even do it. I don't have the accent. I'm sorry. If I had known that you were reporting for a national paper, I never would have been so forward. Although he was not a public figure in his own right, he was still famous in the country as the son of former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. The editorial asks, shouldn't the son of a former prime minister be aware of the rights and wrongs that go along with public socializing? Did he learn through his vast experiences in public life that groping a strange young woman isn't in the handbook of proper etiquette, regardless of who she is, what her business is, or where they are? So when was this published? I think it does say. I don't even see where it says the date. Do you guys see it? August 4th. But when? Since becoming leader, maybe it was published in 2000. Since becoming leader of the Commonwealth country, Trudeau has proudly flaunted his feminist credentials and adopted a zero-tolerance stance within his own Liberal Party to sexual misconduct. Earlier this year, he told CBS he didn't think it likely any allegations of sexual impropriety would emerge about him. Well, I mean, he's obviously wrong now since allegations have surfaced. When asked on the radio show, The House, if anyone would likely accuse him, he said, "I don't think so. I've been very, very careful in my life to be thoughtful and to be respectful of people's space and people's headspace as well." In a statement to BuzzFeed, his press secretary, Matt Pascuso, said, "As the Prime Minister has said before, he has always been very careful to treat everyone with respect. His first experiences with activism were on the issue of sexual assault at McGill, and he knows the importance of being thoughtful and respectful. He remembers being in Creston for the Avalanche Foundation, but doesn't think he had any negative interactions there." So one second, let me open a window here. I'll see if you guys, let me see. Yeah, that's balanced. Okay, so McGill sexual assault. I just want to see if this is bullshit. Yeah. We're here to learn not to face harassment. Well, it sounds like this was a while ago, so maybe if you guys want to drop it in the Discord, let me know if you did. I'll take a look at the chat in a second. Drop any links you know about that. What's going on? Live chat. Okay. So Perseus is here. Yeah. So if you guys have any links about that relevant stuff, just let me know. Relevant to the Trudeau past and obviously this sexual harassment, because I've always been. This is the way I look at sexual harassment issues. You know, I was on a stream yesterday with Heavy Arms Kai, who is he's a Patreon supporter of some black guy, so I am too. So he had a stream. That's Derek Blackman's channel, and we were talking about the role of feminism, and I said, you know, the real issue with feminism isn't really that women don't have rights. It's that, you know, sometimes when they want to file a complaint, they do need good legal representation sometimes. And the issue is not whether we believe them. The issue is that if there is no due process of law and presumption of innocence that we have in Western countries, then in reality, sexual harassment laws are meaningless because you know, the powerful people will be able to squelch those issues that come up. You know, they'll be able to silence people, as Harvey Weinstein did. And those that are not as powerful will often get thrown into prison or sued or something, and lose their reputation, lose their job sometimes. And that's basically where I stand on it. So even Justin Trudeau, I think, is you know, he's a human joke just walking around. I believe he's entitled to the presumption of innocence and a fair trial. I also think that, unfortunately, he's not going to be afforded. If he is afforded due process, it's a good thing. But it doesn't jibe with the message of the Liberal Party. It doesn't jibe with the message of modern liberalism at all. You know, modern liberalism as opposed to the liberalism of 20, 30 years ago. It basically assumes that people are, you know, due to their belonging to a certain category, that they are either entitled to a higher or lower level of trust by the society at large. So that's what Trudeau has been promoting his entire career, even though he's come from a very rich family himself. He's the picture of privilege in Canada. If there's anybody who's privileged in Canada, it would be a member of the Trudeau family. So I personally, I wouldn't care either way what happens to him in this case, but I do believe in due process, even for people I think are horrible pieces of crap. The John Gomeshi trial, yeah, I heard something very brief about that. I never really got interested in it because, you know, I heard it was like kind of more of a local issue. So I did hear that name before. Arjun Sinha, not surprising that Trudeau did that because his dad was allegedly a huge horn dog. What I've heard more and more, and I've seen evidence of it, is that Justin Trudeau is actually the bastard child of Fidel Castro. And there are photos of that where, so, you know, you just see, I don't know, they may have affected a bit the photo of Fidel Castro, but that's the way I remember him looking. And he does look, that's Castro before the revolution. There's a bit of a resemblance. I mean, remember, I mean, I've never said that I rule out that Chelsea Clinton is actually Webb Hubbell's daughter. So, you know, basically, I'm open to entertaining the possibility. Let's put it that way. So that's enough about Canada, eh? We're going to talk about a country that's really in trouble, Venezuela. And a lot of people talk about the currency falling off a cliff, the Bolivar. That's absolutely an issue. Well, one of the reasons that it's doing that, though, is because the oil industry is falling apart. And I've actually seen video of the cafeteria at the oil ministry and PDVSA, which is the national oil conglomerate of Venezuela, where the National Guard troops go into the cafeteria and beat the shit out of workers that are protesting. So, you know, I could probably find it too. Yeah, let me just do that. See here. Just want to make sure that you guys can't see that screen because I don't want to see. Yeah, you guys can't see it. Some of these people that I get information from, they don't want people to know that they're getting the information from me. So here you go. You should be able to hear this in a second. 1 second. Let me just. This is a work cafeteria in Venezuela. You just see National Guard militiamen coming in and beating the shit out of people. You know, it says PDVSA workers protest and they send in the Bolivarian National Guard, GAB.AI. Okay, so this does happen. This happened on March 23rd, and the reason I bring this up, yesterday I was getting, you know, trolled back. I was trolling Jamarl Thomas's feed because he had Abby Martin on. And Abby Martin is what I would like to call a dumb fuck. She is also basically a mouthpiece for the country that I believe is the worst managed and least ethical country in the world, Venezuela. And the reason I say that is because you take a country that had every single economic marker needed to succeed back in the 90s when Chavez took it over. And he literally proved that socialism can turn the best situation into the worst situation. I'm not saying that Venezuela was perfect in the 90s. I'm saying that it had everything it needed to succeed. Okay, I'm not saying that the governments were better before him, or that not that they were better, but I'm not saying that they were good before him. They were probably better. But when you talk about whether a country has what it takes to succeed, Venezuela in the 90s, it had industries there that were non-oil. It had a major oil industry. It had agriculture. It had hydroelectric projects. It was a developed country in the 90s. It was considered one of the better developed countries in Latin America up until up until then, of course. Nowadays, it's kind of falling apart in a really direct way. So dozens of tankers weighing the load over 24 million barrels of Venezuelan crude are sitting at the country's main oil export terminal with the loading delays at almost a month, Reuters reports, citing shipping data. This could put the company in breach of its oil supply contracts with refiners such as Valero and oil majors such as Chevron and China's CNPC. That's bad news because everybody wants to talk about how Venezuela, the U.S. is fucking it over with sanctions. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter. I can tell you, okay? And I want you to prove otherwise. As long as you can trade with China, American sanctions don't mean dick. China is the most important trade partner in the world today for anybody. If you can trade with China, you can trade with anyone. It's been proven with North Korea. It's been proven with other countries. It doesn't mean your country's going to be successful, but it means that you have a gateway to the world. China is the gateway to the world. Anything that you want to buy that's from here, well, where do most of our commodities come from? Most of our manufactured parts, they don't come from the United States. They come from China. It's not. I mean, it's not a secret. It's been that way for years. So people want to make it seem like American sanctions, they're crippling the Venezuelan economy, because of the banking sector or whatever. No, there are loopholes through it. It's been proven over and over again. There's very few countries that have actually been wrecked by sanctions. If sanctions had worked, how come they didn't work with Iraq? I'm not saying we should have invaded Iraq. I don't believe that we should have invaded Iraq, but sanctions did not bring down Saddam. They didn't. And Saddam wasn't in constant economic crisis because of sanctions. Okay? Yeah, the people did suffer there. And there was some degradation of the standard of living there, but ultimately there was they worked out some sort of corrupt bargain with the UN. There was the oil for food program, and there were a lot of kickbacks or whatever. So the sanctions isn't what really ruins a country. The sanctions are really, they're a constraint that hurts the economy as a general rule. But, you can't blame an entire economic meltdown when you have massive oil reserves and there are still U.S. firms like Chevron willing to buy oil from your country. You cannot blame sanctions then, because the sanctions in essence don't mean shit. I believe the majority of these sanctions are actually on Venezuelan securities and things like that. Let's see the chat. Where did Geronimo go? Hoping he would stick around. J-Man says, after the lesbians we're going to get into the pedophiles that they hang out and possibly what's going on in Tucson, Arizona with the supposed... people keep talking about that. Why don't we just get it over with? Okay, Tucson pedophile. I don't know. Okay, so they put up the first thing. I haven't looked into it, okay? And I'm sorry, but I don't know that much. So I want to know where should I look for it. Okay, so let me know. I will cover it. It's just like it's not really the focus of my show. It seems the Maduro diet comes with dinner and a show. Well, yeah, they absolutely, These people, the people who, they defend Maduro, they will blame everybody but him. Or Abby Martin yesterday, she said, there's some mismanagement and some corruption. Look, when you have an army general running the largest oil conglomerate or the oil conglomerate of the country and sending the National Guard into the cafeteria and beating the shit out of people that are protesting, when you have a limit on how many people can quit their job during the week, you have to stop deflecting the blame. Okay, Arjun Perseus says, I can't comprehend why intervention has not taken place there yet. To me, it makes perfect sense to justify in terms of feeding the people. Well, I don't think then. This is where I disagree on one thing. I don't think that the U.S. can get involved in Venezuela without ruining our own. We get involved in these countries, and then whatever happens, we get blamed for what happens after that. Nobody. If the day after the U.S. intervenes in Venezuela, everything else, they'll start calling it an occupation of the country and the imposition of the empire again. And there's no way to successfully do it. And eventually the U.S. will pull out, and Venezuela will remain kind of a dump again. And who will be blamed for it? The United States. An intervention. What would be my idea for an intervention? If you want to do food drops by air, why not do that? You can do airlifting food to there. Is that an idea? You could do that. And then the Venezuelan government will. I mean, if they protest, they'll be like, "How dare you give food to our starving people?" They'll file. It'll be the most ridiculous diplomatic protest ever. Country intervenes in other country to feed the citizens that it starves to death. Clinton put sanctions on India for testing nukes in Tehran. It didn't work because we were friends with everyone else. Look, I think that what Bill Clinton did, if he did do that, it's the most hypocritical thing. Well, there's a lot of hypocritical things he did, but I always harp on, I keep this book literally as close as I can to the screen, Year of the Rat, where he basically had nuclear technology, ballistic missile technology, but not necessarily nuclear technology, sold to China that allowed them to have ballistic missiles that could reach the U.S. And then who did they sell it to? Pakistan. So, I mean, what the hell? Yeah, sanctions are bullshit. I don't think, I don't know what the answer is. I just think the sanctions they're not really working in the way that we've done them so far. And, a lot of people, there's a magazine called Foreign Policy Magazine, and it doesn't matter which way you go. You could be pro-tariffs, anti-tariffs. You could be pro-engagement with North Korea, against engagement with North Korea. They'll always say that Donald Trump is doing it wrong because they hate him. Perseus Gold says, I think the problem, though, is that all the interventions so far have been to serve corporate interests, not to create stability. If Trump could actually intervene in a way that would make stability. No, I mean, it's not. Look, I understand it. I know Venezuelans who want him to intervene. I would say that it doesn't work. And our reputation just gets smeared because our own media hates the United States. And, I've consistently stood on this point that the U.S. should be involved in less countries. We need to get our troops out of countries like Italy, where there hasn't been a war since the 50s, since the 40s. We still have troops in Italy. We still have troops in Turkey. We still have troops in, the Persian Gulf. We still have troops in Okinawa. We still have troops in the Philippines. I think we still do. They might have left. I remember we had that massive naval base, Subic Bay. Your disdain for the Clintons is a wonder of this world. There was a guy yesterday that was claiming I was a shill for the Clintons. When I was on the Jamarl Thomas stream, he was claiming, it's a Hillbot here. I was like, yeah, that's probably the most ironic insult anybody's ever given me. By the way, I was going to do other Clinton reviews, but I forgot to do it today because I was working on somebody's story. So, maybe next week there will be another Clinton review. There's one about how a book I read back in the winter called, I'll show it to you right now. So this is from, I think it's from 2003 or 2004 by Richard Poe, and it's called Hillary's Secret War, The Clinton Conspiracy to Muzzle Internet Journalists. So this is from all the way back then. Hi, Larry Gerke. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. So we left Subic Bay. I think we do have other troops involved there, maybe in Mindanao or the southern Philippines, where there's Muslim where there are oppressed minorities. How do we put it? There's an insurgency in the south. Actually, one of the insurgent groups is called the Moro Islamic Liberation Force, or MILF, MILF. Not joking. I'm not joking. That's what they're called. Perseus Gold's correct. Italy had the years of lead in the 70s and 80s where commies and fascists had a mill. Yeah, the Ani Diplomo. That was a big deal there. That's why I call this show American Gladio, because we're kind of seeing a sort of a type of the same type of thing here. There's right wingers and left wingers fighting each other all the time here. Meanwhile, there's secret intelligence services are lying to everybody, and they're just fomenting this discord in order to make things worse for everyone. Larry Gerke says U.S. 6th Fleet headquarters is in Naples. Yeah, you would know that because you were in the Navy. So I have no problem with stationing our troops there temporarily, places like that. If we need if Italy needs to host one of our ships or something. But we don't need massive troop commitments to some of these countries. I'd say the majority of these countries, we don't need troop commitments. If anything, if these countries want to have a defense, we sell them weapons up front. We say, hey, you want this, bucket of nukes or something? And they're like, yeah, we'll take them. And you sell it to them. Just kidding. But that's an abstraction of the process. You say, well, we have these howitzer artillery cannons or whatever. These howitzers. I don't think a howitzer is a cannon, but you get the idea. You want to buy one? That's about it. None of this foreign aid crap. Nothing. To nobody. No foreign aid. Just sell the fucking weapons and that's it. Have you seen Black Pigeon Speaks video on the rise of the American mercenary class? I think it's on my watch list, so I probably will soon. So we've talked about Venezuela's crude oil issue. So they have oil that's ready to go, but they can't load it. Or sorry, no, they have tankers waiting to load over 24 million barrels of Venezuelan crude. But Venezuela isn't pumping enough oil to give it to them, and they haven't been able to meet their commitment for the amount of oil that they need. The amount that has to be loaded, according to Reuters, is equal to Venezuela's total oil and oil product shipments for April this year, or 1.49 million barrel per day. That amount was also below the contracted volumes, which were for a total 2.15 million barrel per day. So they're already, almost less than. I mean, they really, really fell short of the amount that they were supposed to pump. In May, exports fell further as ConocoPhillips moved to seize export facilities of PDVSA in the Caribbean. I know that on Curacao, which is a beautiful island out there run by the Dutch, they started seizing facilities there. Aggravating the loading delays as the Venezuelan company had to redirect tankers to its own ports to avoid them being seized as well. Conoco is enforcing a court ruling that awarded it, this is the funniest part of the story, awarded a substantial compensation for the forced nationalization of its assets in Venezuela by the Hugo Chavez government. That tanker loading delays and the build of crude and fuels has also worsened Venezuela's oil production situation, which is already grim enough. According to S&P Platts, the company has lost some 900,000 barrel per day in daily production since 2016, and in April pumped only an average of 1.41 million barrel per day. So that's the state of Venezuela. If anybody tells you that it's the fault of American sanctions, no, I mean, this ConocoPhillips thing, they did it to themselves. They confiscated a private company's property in Venezuela, and they thought, well, nobody's going to fuck with us because they need our oil. Well, when the company sues you in international court and you lose, you can only blame yourself. So that's it for that. So Perseus, Larry, let's see here. Nicaragua talks on hold as student becomes 135th victim of violence. I bring up Nicaragua. I feel that Nicaragua is one of the more important countries for the future, the next 5 years. If we have a lot of Nicaraguans coming to our borders because of violence over there due to Social Security, people will wonder, what happened there. That people are suddenly coming here. And in a lot of cases, people won't know because nobody was talking about it in 2018, except for places like this channel. It says gunmen opened fire on a barricade manned by anti-government protesters, killing a student amid stalled efforts to revive peace negotiations between the government and opposition. Roman Catholic bishops came away from a meeting late Thursday with President Daniel Ortega without a formal plan to return to the negotiating table. Let me see if somebody added anything on the Discord. Second. Nope. So I was hoping people would drop links. Yeah, if you guys have any links to send me, you can put them on the Discord, and let me know about stories you want me to cover, or if you want to come on a live chat one day, a live stream. I've had Arjun on. I definitely haven't had Larry on, but he has been, and he has watched the channel for a while. So, a student leader said Chavarria was killed and another... Wait, okay, so meanwhile, the Nicaraguan Center for Human Rights said 19-year-old student Cesar Chavarria became the 135th person to die in anti-government protests that have flared since April 18th. The student leader said Chavarria was killed and another student was wounded overnight Thursday to Friday when armed men in vans opened fire on a barricade near the National Autonomous University of Managua. State broadcaster Radio Nicaragua was targeted in a firebomb attack early Friday, the official government website reported, charging that the arson was organized and paid for by the right. I don't know how they determined that. So the right... okay, I see what they... Yeah, so they're blaming the right-wing protesters for firebombing a radio station owned by the government when the government has been shooting students who are protesting over Social Security and raised taxes. The Nicaraguan Episcopal Conference said the bishops had presented the pain and anguish of people who have suffered in recent weeks during a frank and sincere meeting with Ortega. Did not elaborate on the details of the bishop's proposal, but said it reflects the feelings of many sectors of Nicaraguan society and was awaiting a reaction from Ortega. Silvio Jose Baez, the auxiliary bishop of Managua, said Ortega asked us for a period of reflection to give us an answer, which we asked he give us in writing, after which they will consider the feasibility of renewed negotiations. So at this point, they don't even know if they want to continue writing. Look at this story at the bottom. Human Ken reveals his photo before surgeries. So we'll see in a second how many comments there are on this story and how many there are on this other one over here. Bishops had called off the talks last week after 16 people were killed in a crackdown by security forces on a protest led by mothers of victims of the unrest. Okay? Costa Rica announced Friday it would provide visas to relatives of diplomats accredited in Nicaragua who wanted to leave. We have to decide to provide them with diplomatic courtesy visas so that, as a result of the crisis situation in Nicaragua, the relatives of the diplomats can come to Costa Rica, said Foreign Minister Epsy Campbell. So let's see how many people commented on this Ken video. Well, I guess it is just a piece of spam. So, never mind that. But there's 0 on this one. Should I show my video on Yahoo? I think, maybe we'll maintain at least a little standard here. We're going to do that in a second. But you have here, this was from Telesur. They don't even mention the deaths. It says, let's see if there's even any mention of the word death. Nothing. Killed. Nothing. This is in the chat, by the way, or in the description. They don't mention a single person dying. It says Nicaragua, Ortega and bishops meet hoping to resume dialogue. A national dialogue between Nicaragua's government, civil society groups, and the groups in the country's opposition may resume Friday following a meeting between Daniel Ortega and bishops from Nicaragua's Episcopal Conference late Thursday. In an official statement, Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes said, "We have submitted the proposal that collects the sentiments of many sectors of Nicaraguan society and expresses the yearnings of the majority of the people. While information about the contents of the proposal are yet to be released, and the government hasn't issued an official statement, the Episcopal Conference said Thursday's one-hour meeting with Ortega occurred in an environment of serenity, frankness, and sincerity. According to the bishops, the President's response to their proposal will be evaluated in the plenary of the National Dialogue to assess the possibility to reestablish negotiations. Talks between the government and opposition groups, including business people and university students, ceased late in May. The opposition in the United States blamed government repression for the failure of the talk, ignoring overwhelming evidence." So this is what they're saying: ignoring overwhelming evidence of protesters committing acts of arson on public buildings, attacks on government workers, and attacks on ruling party supporters. Well, if that happens, then why don't you give evidence of the number of deaths of government supporters in this? The Nicaraguan political crisis began in mid-April when protesters took to the streets in opposition to Social Security reforms that sought to overcome the system's financial crisis by increasing contribution by both employees, that's 0.75%, and employers, 3.5%, to avoid raising the retirement age. So that's a 3.5% income tax increase or Social Security increase for employers, and a 0.75% increase for the workers. But they don't mention that the actual benefits were cut as well. President Ortega withdrew the reform and issued calls for dialogue to avoid a spiral of violence. However, those attempts were unsuccessful, and opposition groups issued calls for Ortega to step down, a demand government officials say amounts to a coup. No, that's not the same thing. Let's see here. Right, opposition movements in Nicaragua follow the same. So this is the difference. So they're basically using guns that are made out of PCP or PCV, what's it called? PVC pipe. They're using PVC pipe, and they're calling that violent protest. Yeah, it is violent, but it's not as if, these PVC pipe guns are pieces of shit. I've seen them used, and everybody knows about the potato gun trick. They're no match for fully armed police officers. Wait, this is also important. Any response, see, response with, it's almost a response, but it's actually a response, is met by sanctions. So that's Telesur. This is the company that Abby Martin works for. Abby Martin is a dumb fuck, and this is the way that they'll. Look at the way they cover countries with a P. Start with a P. Countries with a P protest in the Middle East. Okay? You know, they have here, look, it's a real peaceful protest over here in New Delhi, which is really, what's so funny is that when I bring up the issue of religion in the context of the conflict between the country with a P and the country with an I, people like to say, well, you're just some sort of a bigoted, right-wing, neoliberal Hitler, and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Well, what is there in New Delhi that has to do with Palestine? I mean, some of these people appear to be in garb relating to a certain group of enthusiasts for, you know, I would say a particular faith. I don't know which one it would be, though. I mean, could anybody tell me in the chat? Bold like a leopard, how similar are Ortega and Maduro? Well, Ortega actually was a guerrilla back in the 80s. So Maduro basically got into power by being close to Chavez. And he was a bus driver before that, before he was in politics. Larry Gerke, anyone stupid enough to fire a PVC pipe gun at an armed officer deserves whatever happens to them. Well, let's talk about it this way, okay? Yes, if you're fighting openly with the police, then yeah, I believe that they can shoot you. But the fact of the matter is that, for example, the march where they fired on those women that were commemorating their dead relatives, that didn't have the PVC pipe guns. So that's not a good excuse. Where did Perseus go? Oh, he has to go eat. Well, come back when you're done. Jeffrey's here. What's up? So the country with a P, you see here, they say, well, ongoing ethnic cleansing. So is that not editorial reporting? They're kicking African immigrants out of territory they don't even own. Well, who's Venezuela to tell people who owns anything? You know, Venezuela was formed in the 1800s as a Spanish colony. The Viceroy of New Granada. That's what it was until then. There's no such thing as Venezuela. So here we go. So the question is, why are there people? First of all, why are they putting this video at the bottom of a video about Gaza? If the immigrants fled from Africa to Israel, how come they didn't stop in Egypt? How come they didn't stop in Sudan? How come they didn't go to Libya? Could it be that the treatment that they get in those countries is worse than in the country with an I? I'm sorry I said the country's name, because I know that when you say the name of these countries, apparently people start to get all opinionated about you. Larry Gerke. Okay. Abby Martin is not stupid. She is, however, quite opinionated, and we all know what opinions are like. No, she is dumb as a fucking box of rocks, and people pretend that she is a real journalist and that she has a sophisticated opinion. But when she goes around and for example, she tells people she can't go a single interview without talking about Sam Harris, because Sam Harris had the gall to contradict her on one issue, and that was, you know, whether Islam is a threat to the West. So she said, oh, Sam Harris, because he's a neurologist, what does he have to say about, you know, world geopolitics? He should stick to his own issues. You know, so by that standard, I said I had a stream about 2 or 3 weeks ago with Sun Fei Yang about Richard Wolff, who's a Marxist professor at the New School over in New York City. He's a Marxist, but he prefers to work for one of the most expensive private colleges in the entire country. Okay, $45,000 tuition. And Nemo the cat, welcome. So then she asked him, questions about Marx, and he said, well, Marx is a philosopher. He's not an economist. And then they talk about economics for like 20, 25 minutes. And, she never pulled the whole credentials shit on him, on Marx. She's never done it on Noam Chomsky. She can't, these people, they don't realize, I could go every broadcast and just talk about Jordan Peterson. I could go every broadcast and talk about who's another big philosopher of free market economics. How many times in a broadcast will I say the words Milton Friedman? Not that many. I think Milton Friedman had like a lot of brilliant ideas, but I don't literally talk about him like he's got the gospel of Christ or something. I'm also not Christian. We've had a guy on who's a Christian evangelical, Alex, he's doing like some important work. Actually, I think he's in Guatemala now. I should check up on him. I'm not even kidding. And, there was the volcano and everything. And the guy, God bless him, but literally every person he talks about, we'll talk about how he's a failure in every respect. And then Alex will say, oh, but he's a true Christian. It's like, how the hell do you know? Abby's no worse than Maddow. Well, I've done videos about Rachel Maddow too. So it's the same shit. They're both garbage. Okay, you want to know who are the journalists that I support the most? I'd say probably Tim Pool and, Paul Joseph Watson. And if you want to go on the left, Tim Black and that dude with the weird haircut, the white guy from Kansas, that asshole. That's a good journalist. His name escapes me. Thomas Frank. So there are like legitimate journalists on the left. It's just Abby Martin is not a real journalist. She's a fraud. I've done 2 or 3 big, like long debunking videos on her. One of which was an election video. The other one was on how she does, the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, which completely omitted every economic fact relevant to it. And then the third one was not long ago. It was the Richard Wolff one. Gerke says God-Sod is philosophical in the Jordan Peterson vein. Yeah, and the fact is that over the past week they've had a big disagreement because God-Sod doesn't like the Carl Jung school of psychology, so he's disagreed with Peterson, and it's okay. People can disagree. This isn't an issue of disagreement with Abby Martin. I disagree with Styx Hexenhammer over Israel and Palestine. I disagree with other people over Venezuela. I disagree with other people over, whether, Social Security should be a real program. Carlos, for example, thinks that Carlos Cordova, who's been on the show, believes that Social Security should be a government-run program. And I respect Carlos. I respect who's another left-winger that I've had on. I had a teacher on last year who I can't use her name, who's a Bernie supporter. I've had Bernie supporters on, Josephine and Jim, and I respect them for their opinions. Abby Martin, I have zero respect for as a human being or anything. I think she's complete trash. She is equivalent to Rolling Stone, in my opinion. Vault 420 says, I think he's saying I'm mining for something. So I'll move on. I think that's a signal that I've talked too much about this. So yeah, Nicaragua, they won't mention the people that died there, but they'll go to Gaza. Gaza, there were 2 or 3 people who died today charging towards a fence, and the demonstration was instituted by Iran after the So thousands marked Jerusalem Day with pro-Palestine protests in the Middle East. The demonstration was instituted by Iran after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, marking the... Wow, they actually used the word. I didn't know we're allowed to use the word there. I think somebody should ban Tel Assur because they're Islamophobic, and they admit that the issue is a religious issue, marking the annual protest against Israel's occupation of Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of Muslims took to this. Oh, they used another one. Oh my God. These people have fucking balls. Took to the streets in the capitals of Iran and Iraq Friday in recognition of Jerusalem Day. The mass demonstration, which started following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, marks the annual protest against Israel's ongoing occupation of Jerusalem and serves as a show of, quote, unwavering support for the Palestinian people, the capital of their homeland, and sovereignty. Israeli flags were set alight in Baghdad and Tehran. Effigies of United States President Donald Trump were also burnt, according to ABC News. They probably just spray painted the Obama effigies white and then burned those, and then put some orange hair on it. A large turnout of Palestinian demonstrators was also seen along the Israeli border fence in the Gaza Strip. Protesters have highlighted the blockade of Palestinian territory by Israel and Egypt, according to the Globe and Mail. Organizers of the demonstration in Gaza said Israeli army drones hovered above their land, dropping flammable materials on piles of old tires and tear gas to repress protesters. So, do you realize what this means? Organizers of the demonstration in Gaza said Israeli army drones hovered above their land, dropping flammable materials on piles of old tires. Okay, why are there piles of old tires near the fence? So the Palestinians hauled those piles of old tires over to the fence, and they were like, well, we're just going to keep these tires here until, this demonstration blows over. And the Israelis ruined their plans to store those tires near the fence by dropping flammable liquids all over them and lighting them on fire. So, wow. That's pretty. I mean, I think it's a common courtesy that when people haul a bunch of old tires over to a certain area, like near a border, you don't light it on fire, right? So they quoted the organizers. They said the organizers, but they don't quote their names. So it should be pretty easy to do it. Israeli security forces and snipers perched behind earthen berms have claimed the lives of at least 115 people with a P and injured nearly over 12,000 since the series of protests began in late March. The Jerusalem Day protests take place annually on the last Friday of Ramadan and acknowledge the city's historic Arab name, referring to it as Al-Quds Day. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and White House senior advisor, has expressed annoyance and embarrassment with Kuwait's recently drafted UN resolution, which, faced with constant Israeli aggression, demanded protection for Palestinian civilians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. So that's the quality of Tel Assur. That is the group. That's the newspaper. Well, not the newspaper. It's the broadcaster that Abby Martin works for. That's the quality of journalism there. Okay, they're claiming that protesters dragged a bunch of piles of tires to the protest site close to the fence, and then the Israelis dropped flammable liquids on it from a drone. but yet, with all the journalists that were there, they can't catch any footage of the drones actually doing it. So that's their journalistic explanation of it. So guys, spread that story. The people with the P really need you to step up because they need 1,050,000 people to tweet about the country with a P. Not the people in Nicaragua, they don't matter, right? Because that story doesn't matter because Abby Martin doesn't think it's important that people are getting shot in Nicaragua by a government that that works with. That basically is a vassal country of the country that she works for, that she receives a salary for. So, forget about Nicaragua. You might as well, tweet about, the country with a P. And you all know which country I'm talking about. Okay. So there you go. I used, by the way, certain people were complaining earlier. Why would you watch Alex Jones or whatever? Why don't you think that it's useful to, they were complaining that I attack Tel Assur, but I also watch InfoWars. I said I watch both of them. I watch both of them. I actually laugh at both of them. I laugh at Alex Jones because he's entertaining. I laugh at Telesur because they're pathetic losers and they're basically running out of money. Let's see here. What's the next one? And, the same story appears here in the Star Tribune. It says, people with a P killed in protest near Gaza, country with an I border. Troops fired live rounds and tear gas as thousands of Palestinians protested near the Gaza border fence Friday, and at least 4 demonstrators were killed, including a teenage boy with over 600 wounded, Gaza health officials said. So this is the Minneapolis Star Tribune quoting Faris Akram, which is a name that would be consistent with somebody from the country with a P. They're claiming that the American press is biased against the country with a P. In the capitals of Iran and Iraq, thousands of Shiite Muslims marched they used the name again. Oh my God. It's like a sacred cow has been slaughtered. Sorry, some people might. By the way, I've never heard, the phrase sacred cow, like killing a sacred cow. Where does it come from? It comes from the Hindu religion. Nobody ever talks about whether that is something that we should be sensitive about, using phrases like sacred cow, right? Because the Hindu religion isn't practiced by people who go around and blow up buildings all over the world, from the Philippines to Argentina. Gerke says everyone knows those tires were staged there for burning. I mean, staged there by the people with a... You can't say that word because it's unfair to them. We have to say the people with a P. And also, no, I believe since Telesur has Abby Martin, who's apparently the authority on everything, we have to accept now the story that they brought the tires there in order to just store them during the demonstration. And the Israelis kind of destroyed their stored tires by pouring gasoline over them with drones, which, if you think about it, is pretty stupid. You construct this... they did say flammable liquid, so it could be anything. Jeffrey Allen Johnson says, welcome, by the way. I don't think I mentioned you. Can anyone fathom what would happen if Mexicans lined up at our borders burning shit and slinging rocks at us? It would be fucking target practice for Americans. Larry Gerke says, I just ate me a big-ass porterhouse steak off a sacred... By the way, Arjun is Hindu, and I've never seen him object to us saying something like that. I'm just bringing it up. It's odd how I don't know that many Hindus. I just don't see them getting as offended as other people. It's like really, it's bizarre. There's a lot of people who, what the fuck, who keeps texting me? By the way, those of you that don't know, the Hard News Network, which I do write for, but they did get a strike for covering the Atlantic's, not the Atlantic, they covered the MSNBC, which was covering the Atlantic's coverage of the West Bank and Gaza issues. So, that's just proof that if you dispute something, for example, those networks, MSNBC and by the way, also the Atlantic, they don't take a pro-Israel stance on it. I'd say CNN has a very bizarre, like idiosyncratic, like inconsistent stance on it, which, I guess you could say it's as close to objectivity as there is. Fox is clearly pro-Israel. We're not going to even pretend that. So there is bias in both realms. But you're not seeing people banned from or getting strikes for criticizing Fox News's coverage of the country with a P and the country with an I. Yeah, you guys are talking. Okay, I see what you're saying. So we talked about that. We talked about the country with a P. Among the dead Friday was 15-year-old Haitham al-Jamal. His family said he was taking part in a protest in Rafah in southern Gaza when he was shot. A total of 12 children under age 16 have been killed in the protests. French news agency Agence France-Presse said one of its photographers, Mohammed Abed al-Baba, was wounded at a mass rally after Israeli forces opened fire. AFP said al-Baba was wearing a press vest and helmet about 200 meters from the border when hurt. It said he was wounded below the knee while trying to take a photo of a wounded protester after Israeli troops opened fire. The photographer's injury was not life-threatening, but he was to undergo surgery. Israel's military had no comment on the incident. After Muslim prayers at noon Friday, thousands of Gaza residents streamed toward 5 protest tent camps that were erected more than 2 months ago, each several hundred meters or yards from the fence. From there, smaller groups walked closer to it. In a camp east of Gaza City, activists burned tires. No, the flammable liquid, the drones and shit. That's what happened, releasing black smoke. Others threw stones or flew kites with burning rags attached, aiming to send them over the border and set Israeli fields on fire. Israeli troops fired volleys of tear gas, including from drones, that sent protesters running for cover. One man with a bullhorn shouted, "America is the biggest evil." At one point, 7 activists in black and white striped shirts meant to resemble concentration camp uniforms from World War II approached the fence. It says, "We want to remind the world that the Israeli occupation is committing the same massacres that the Nazis committed," said activist Ahmed Abu Artima. The attempt to draw a parallel between Gaza's suffering and the Holocaust was bound to draw angry reactions. Israel was established in the wake of the Holocaust, marks an annual Remembrance Day for the 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis, and is home to the world's largest population of Holocaust survivors. In a statement, the Israeli military said, by the way, on some of the same protest kites, they have swastikas. So it's either decide which one. Are you on the side of the Nazis, or are you on the side of the Nazis' victims? So it also said a number of explosive devices and a grenade were hurled during the protests, and later said the military post had been struck by gunfire. At the expense of the people of Gaza, the Hamas terrorist organization continues to use terror in order to damage security infrastructure and harm security forces, it said, adding that troops had been reinforced along the border. So then it says, the military had escorted journalists to sniper positions along the fence along Gaza's northeast border. So I'd like to know, how can they be accused of trying to shoot and kill journalists when they're also escorting them to the sniper positions? Crowds of several dozen Palestinians could be seen approaching the fence constantly as soldiers fired tear gas to scatter them. Some Palestinians launched, or people with a P, as soldiers fired, some people with a P launched kites rigged with incendiary devices, which were intercepted by small military drones. Snipers perched about 50 meters from the fence and protected by sandbags and concrete barriers frequently fired warning shots into the air. So warning shots? So if there's warning shots and they're still approaching, then they're not. That's a hostile action, and I know that because I served there, and those of you that watch the channel know that. I scared Jeff away. I don't know. More than 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled in the 1948 Mideast War over Israel's creation. 2/3 of Gaza's 2 million residents are descendants of refugees. Protester Fadi Saleh said the frequent marches have helped revive sympathies in the Arab world for the Palestinians, but that more could be done. We need real Arab support and solidarity with our cause, said Saleh, a student of Arabic literature who wore a medical mask against the tear gas. Yeah, that's not going to get you very far, Arabic literature degree. Israel's use of potentially lethal force against the protesters has drawn international criticism. Rights groups have said Israel's open fire rules are unlawful. Well, it's getting long, but so it says here, remember, this is from Faris Akram of the Associated Press. It's not by Shlomo Schmulberg or something, or Yerachmiel. What's another really Jewish name? Shmuley Jewberg. I don't know. The protests have largely been organized by Hamas and to some extent by the smaller Islamic Jihad militant group. So I love how they can use the words Islamic Jihad and then say it's a militant group. Both have received political and financial support from Iran, but they also pursue their own agendas. Growing despair in Gaza over blockade-linked hardships, including daily power cuts and rising poverty, have driven turnout. Israel and Egypt argue that they must maintain the blockade to contain Hamas and other militant groups which have built up arsenals over the years, including short-range rockets. Israel and Hamas, which seeks Israel's destruction, have fought 3 cross-border wars since 2008. The Jerusalem Day protests are being held each year on the last Friday of the Muslim fasting. Again, they use the word Muslim. Fasting month of Ramadan. The day is known in Arabic as Al-Quds Day, a reference to the city's historic Arabic name. Israel captured East Jerusalem in the 1967 Mideast War and annexed it to its capital, a move not recognized by most of the international community. Israel's current government has said it will not accept a partition of the city as part of a deal with the people with a P. Tensions were further highlighted last month after the U.S. moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a step seen by both the people with an I and the people with a P as siding with the country with an I on the most sensitive issue in the conflict. East Jerusalem houses major shrines revealed by the people with an M, Christians and Jews. The Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem, the third holiest site in the religion with an I, is built on the spot where tradition says the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The compound sits on the ruins of biblical temples and is revered by Jews as the holiest site of their religion. In Iran's capital of Tehran, thousands joined a Jerusalem Day march in chanting death to Israel and burning, or the country with an I, and burning a Trump effigy. In Iraq, thousands of Iran-backed Shiite militiamen in uniform marched through the streets of the capital of Baghdad, burning a country with an I flag and carrying support posters of the late Iranian leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and Supreme Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So there you have it. You guys are really progressive. Okay, so yeah, that's it for that topic. What else do we have? Obama official, we should have done more on Russian interference in the 2016 election. This is from today. Ben Rhodes, one of President Obama's top national security advisors, acknowledged, quote, "We should have done more to call attention to Russia's information war during the 2016 election, knowing that a much heralded October statement from the U.S. intelligence community failed to even address a major part of the Russian attack." If you look at the October statement from the intelligence community, it doesn't say anything about fake news, Rhodes said in an interview with the Yahoo News podcast Skullduggery. All it talks about is that the Russians hacked and released some of the material, which I think was only a small piece of their information war. My own view is we could have done more and said more, certainly about the information war and fake news dissemination. At the same time, Rhodes sharply criticized Facebook for not taking more aggressive steps to block Russian trolls from manipulating its platform and sharing information with the U.S. government. And frankly, I don't think Facebook has had anywhere near the interaction with the government and frankly the scrutiny that is necessary to say, look, it's not enough to just mouth words about this, Rhodes said. We need more censorship. More cowbell, baby. So having your platform essentially hijacked for the purposes of a foreign adversary living in information boards is something we need to deal with just as aggressively as we dealt with ISIS using social media, and I don't see that happening either. Rhodes' comments, a rare on-the-record admission of a lapse by a senior Obama official, came during a discussion of his new book, The World as It Is, a memoir of the Obama White House. The book recounts Rhodes' role as a speechwriter and senior advisor. Look at all this crap on Anthony Bourdain. It's like, I get it. People liked him. He had a fucking cooking show. What are you going to do? The book recounts Rhodes' role as a speechwriter and senior advisor through the Obama presidency, complete with fly-on-the-wall accounts of deliberations over the killing of Osama bin Laden, the Iran nuclear deal, the Benghazi attack that killed U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens, and other episodes. But in his chapter on the Obama on the Obama response to the Russian attack, on the election, Rhodes makes clear he bristled when he was told he was excluded from National Security Council deliberations in the summer of 2016, purportedly because he was the White House's designated liaison to the Clinton campaign. That's interesting. So the White House had a liaison to the Clinton campaign who was on the government dime. He was simultaneously serving as a deputy national security advisor, and he was also the liaison to the Clinton campaign. Isn't that a little conflict of interest? They couldn't have picked somebody else. When he was told by his boss, Susan Rice, that he couldn't participate in the debate over Russia, I walked downstairs to my office and sank into my chair, Rhodes writes in his book. For 8 years, I'd worked my way up to the place where I thought I'd always be in the room, and now I was being kept out of the room of the most important conversation of all. My mind raced with a mix of self-pity and self-blame. But Rhodes suggested that his exclusion might have made a difference because he, as well as former State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki, had sought to combat how the Russians had manipulated social media during the country's military intervention in Ukraine, flooding the world with bogus accounts of the 2014 shoot-down of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 and other developments during the crisis in that country. Obama officials, as well as the U.S. intelligence community, failed to understand how the Russians were taking their playbook from the Ukraine crisis and now deploying it against the United States, Rhodes said. You learn in government who's in the room kind of dictates what's on the agenda, and not only who was I not in the room, Rhodes said during his skullduggery interview. Nobody who focused on communications was in the room. Instead, our government kind of put the Russian attack in a box of cybersecurity. So basically, his defense is we were incompetent. The American government is incompetent, and basically, he would have done what? He would have done what? You know, they hacked something, they released it. We have to protect the election infrastructure. So I think it's maybe not just me, but if someone with that communication perspective had been in the room, there might have been more attention on this other set of capabilities that we had been living with from Ukraine for years that they were developing that they were deploying in the United States. Rhodes said, because essentially they took their war machine that they built in Ukraine and just brought it to America in 2016. Whether calling for more attention to the issue during the election would have made a difference is another question. When he later raised the issue with Obama directly and told him we're going to be criticized for not focusing on this, Rhodes said the president downplayed the issue. His belief was that essentially the Russians had found soft spots in our media and society such that if we were calling them that out, the people who consume that fake news aren't going to listen to Obama anyway. Trump's going to say the election is rigged. So let's look at a couple comments here. Some of these are pretty funny. Obama, this is my last election. After my election, I have more flexibility. Medvedev, I will transmit this information to Vladimir. But Obama did the same thing to influence Israel election. He was proud of it and told I guess. Where is that blue wave? Sure ain't showing up on Doppler. Kind of like maybe we should have done more in Syria. Exactly. We should have, everything. This was Obama's national security policy for. I think I hear the ice cream truck, so I was distracted for a second. I do feel like getting a little fatter, but I'm going to resist the urge. Look, for 8 years, President Obama went through a number of phases. Phase 1 was apology. Phase 2 was, pretending to change the world. That was the Arab Spring. So, pretending to change the world, it was like, one week you say, oh, the Egyptian government is great. We have such a fantastic relationship with it. Then the next week, the Egyptian government's falling. They're like, we never really liked that guy. He was always like not tipping when we'd go out for dinner. And everybody was, going to see like the hockey game or something. And, we had a common we'd do one check, and he never put in anything to the tip or anything. He just give exactly the amount that everybody owed, and it was a drag. That's the way that they related to everything that was international relations after that first phase, when they were like, oh, we're going to apologize to the world. It was the Obama apology tour. Then after 2012, they moved into this whole thing where, everybody's like destroying our standing in the world. Russia is interfering in Syria, but we don't know anything to do. We're not going to take any action. We're just going to let Russia get in there. So effectively, we're not able to take any action, and intervention is impossible. And then, by the end of the term, it was like, well, the whole, everybody in the world except President Obama is a heartless, soulless demon. And that's why his foreign policy didn't succeed. That was the entire 8 years of his foreign policy. Larry Gerke, I think it was Uncle Hotep, who recently had a vid about some radical feminist chick who baked bread for her family's Thanksgiving feast using yeast she harvested from her skank puss. Yeah, I remember that one. That was a while ago, though. That was around Thanksgiving. I do remember that. That was kind of disgusting. Thank you for putting that image in everyone's head again, Gerke. But we're glad you're back. Trump signals support for legislation easing U.S. ban on pot. Well, before we get to that, I do want to get to Andrew McCabe. So, even CNN is saying McCabe seeks immunity for testimony in congressional hearing over FBI. Let's see if we can. I'm just going to link this. I'm going to archive this link. Fuck CNN. I'm not giving you even one click. Even that bald asshole, Brian Stelter, I'm not giving you any clicks. Brian Stelter, read it and weep. Look at this. Look at this full head of hair, you fucking weirdo. Brian Stelter and Abby Martin. There's a picture in your head. Those two making out. How's about that? Think about that this weekend, Larry. Brian Stelter and Abby Martin making love in hell. That's for you, buddy. This is for Larry. Sorry, Arjun. I just had to say it to Larry because I had to get him back for that comment about the vaginal yeast. McCabe seeks immunity for testimony in a congressional hearing over FBI handling of the Clinton email probe. So if he needs immunity in a case that involves the Clintons, what does that have to do with Trump? Yeah, still no reaction from Larry. If he left, I mean, I'm sorry. You guys had to go through that. Yeah, Brian Stelter. Let's look at a photo of that guy. Brian Stelter. I just look at this guy. This is the photo that makes me really, it creeps me out. Yeah. They put this on TV. This and that. You have this freak and then Michael Wolff. It's like a vampire show or something. It's like the people from Twilight 45 years later. There's this photo too. I mean, how did they pick him to put on camera? That's what I want to know. CNN. Blame Arjun for that. He was talking about serving up fetuses like so many cocktail franks, and that made me remember the yeast bitch. Yeah, what are you gonna do, man? I had to counter in some way. Trump signals support for legislation easing U.S. ban on pot. We'll get back to the Andrew McCabe thing. President Donald Trump said Friday that he's inclined to support a bipartisan. So I'm going to end in about 10-15 minutes. To support a bipartisan effort in Congress to ease the U.S. ban on marijuana, a proposal that would dramatically reshape the nation's legal landscape for pot users and businesses. The federal ban that puts marijuana on the same level as LSD and heroin has created a conflict with more than 24 states that have legalized pot in some form, creating a two-tiered enforcement system where cannabis can be both legal and not. So here you go. I mean, President Obama celebrates. They had to tie Obama and Anthony Bourdain. You know, CNN's big. You know, oh, I'm Mr. Chef. I'm the face of the culinary conscience, and Barack Obama. You know, to be honest, I mean, I don't have anything personal against Anthony Bourdain, but I don't understand why he was such a big deal. You know, his show was like okay, and you know, a lot of times I was thinking it was basically like Top Gear. You know, you have Jeremy Clarkson for yeah, is his name Jeremy Clarkson? Yeah. So Jeremy Clarkson is the asshole from Top Gear, but he's an amazing TV guy. So what are you gonna do? He's one of the greatest TV hosts ever, and you know, he's great. So I always liked Jeremy Clarkson, but people call him a douche because he's a mean person. So what are you gonna do? He's an amazing host, but he's also a douche. Nobody ever does that to Anthony Bourdain, and now they never will because, you know, obviously he took his own life. But I never understood why do they give so much shit to Jeremy Clarkson and not as much to Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, so I'm betting I'm going to get a strike for that. Great evil laugh. Who left? Who farted? Where is Jeff? Did he go home? So the legislation would ensure states have the right to determine the best approach to marijuana within their borders, but some U.S. restrictions would remain, including recreational sales to people under 21. Okay, that's kind of to be expected. The proposal introduced Thursday has support from members of Congress from both parties, including Republican U.S. Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado. I support Senator Gardner. I know exactly what he's doing, Trump told reporters in Washington when asked about the legislation. We're looking at it, but I probably will end up supporting that, yes. This president's remarks place him in conflict with U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, an outspoken opponent of marijuana who lifted an Obama administration policy and freed federal prosecutors to more aggressively pursue cases in states that have legalized marijuana. Trump has sent mixed signals on the drug. While campaigning for president, he pledged to respect states that legalize marijuana, but he also has criticized legalization and implied it should be stopped. Gardner said the legislation would ensure Washington respects the will of voters in each state, whether laws provide for legislation or prohibition. He said in a statement released Thursday that the federal government is closing its eyes and plugging its ears to spreading legislation, but Washington should not interfere with any state's legal marijuana market. Trump's remarks Friday echo a promise that Gardner said he received privately from the president in April to support legislation protecting the marijuana industry in states that have legalized the drug. Another co-sponsor of the measure, Democratic U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, said in a statement that Washington needs to get out of the business of outlawing marijuana. California, home to 1 in 8 Americans, launched the nation's largest legal marijuana marketplace on January 1st, but thousands of businesses that have been licensed are still facing the threat of federal prosecution. A major problem stemming from the federal ban, major banks have been reluctant to do business with marijuana companies, fearing it could lead to prosecution. In California, for example, paying taxes and other transactions are often carried out in cash, sometimes in vast amounts. So that's about it for that. I think it really makes sense if you think about it, and I'll tell you why. The whole Jeff Sessions thing is intentional. Now that people are clear that Donald Trump is not going to keep Jeff Sessions for, I don't think he's going to finish the first term for sure. But I would say that the latest Jeff Sessions is going to remain Attorney General is probably late November. You know, it could be right after the midterms. Trump just fires him right away. He says, "Hey, how'd you like to fly back to Montgomery and not come back. Go to the Robert Trent Jones golf course down there and just not talk to me. I'm tired of seeing you, Keebler Elf. And this thing which he does, if it places him in conflict with Jeff Sessions, okay, then then he signs this bill, and then he fires Jeff Sessions. Then think about it this way: it will cause some of these mainstream media outlets to begin to come out in favor of Jeff Sessions and say, well, Jeff Sessions, I mean, he's trying to manipulate the Mueller probe and whatever by firing Jeff Sessions. Well, these are the same people who, for the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, have complained that Sessions is either racist or that he's a Neanderthal on marijuana, which he is, because, to be honest with you, how much longer can we continue to put people in jail for it? They're going to really either they can praise him for firing Jeff Sessions when he does, or they're going to have to completely contradict their previous opinion on him. And the reason that Trump nominated Sessions to begin with had nothing to do with the marijuana, was obviously because of the immigration. If he hammers out a DACA deal and then also gets the wall, what purpose does he need Jeff Sessions for anymore? He can nominate somebody else. He can implement those immigration policies. You don't need Jeff Sessions to do that. Although Jeff Sessions did put an effort in onto the immigration aspect of his job. But we're talking about basically Trump's strategy, not just with respect to Sessions, but with respect to the media itself. So I think this is a very, very good move on his part. Let's see if we get some people here. Augusto Pinochet is here, by the way. Welcome back. He has a channel now. Middle-aged metrosexual Twilight vampires. I love how Mark Dice savages Brian Stelter. Yeah, he does that. Saw him drive a sports car once. Jeffrey Allen Johnson is hanging out with his dad. He's still here. Anthony Bourdain is hanging around too. Wow, too soon, buddy. Yeah, whatever. People are mourning Anthony Bourdain. I'm like, yeah, I mean, he had a TV show. He seemed miserable the entire time. It's not like I was especially surprised that he did it. I mean, I'll tell you what. I was watching a Michael Jackson video yesterday. When he died, I was really affected by it. I wouldn't say I was sad, but I was like, wow. When Michael Jackson died, that was a huge thing. When Prince died, I want to say when Bono's talent died and he started making shitty albums, that affected me. When there was, who else? Whitney Houston. That was a big one. That guy, Gene Wilder. That was somebody. I really felt bad when he died because I loved all his movies. Pinochet says, we need to start a GoFundMe account to get Bold a new chair. I have another chair here. Just this desk is low, so this is the best one that I can have. Is that what that racket is? I thought Bold was farting there. That would be one Cassie Hebert. Yeah, I always that's what I think. Do people think that? No, it's when I shift the chair, you get this noise. So yeah, sorry, nothing I can do about that. I do need to shift once in a while. So yeah, that's about it for Trump and marijuana. People are saying, oh, finally something I can agree with him on. I'm sure insiders got the news and bought pot stocks last week. That will tick Jeff Sessions off. That's maybe the point. This is very non-GOP-like. What's the Keebler Elf Sessions feel about this? Finally, I can agree. So these people are getting... A lot of these people are going to have nothing to complain about. If he signs this legislation, by the way, there are a lot of progressives who are going to have no platform except calling for universal health care, which they can't get in November. They're going to... First of all, next week, I'm going to do probably a segment on why progressivism has lost already in 2018. Okay, so be ready for that one. But if he does this marijuana thing, then they're really going to be up the creek with no paddle, because uh, ending the drug war or at least getting to a certain point on that was a major plank in their platform. And if Trump's already doing that and retreating on all of his rhetoric about death penalty for drug dealers, then or he has for certain things like opiates, yes, death penalty for drug dealers, but for marijuana, forget it. We're not going to deal with marijuana. Then it's going to be a major crisis for these progressives and even some of these liberal candidates. There was this poll. I'm not going to talk about it today because I don't really care about polls, but it says the majority of voters believe NFL kneeling isn't unpatriotic. So, I don't give a shit what polls say. I know what the market says, and they don't like it. Okay, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe has requested the Senate Judiciary Committee provide him with immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying at an upcoming congressional hearing focused on how senior officials at the FBI and I am running even later than I thought, and Justice Department have handled the investigation of Hillary Clinton's private email server, according to a letter obtained by CNN. Under the terms of such a grant of immunity, no testimony under other information provided by Mr. McCabe could be used against him in a criminal case, wrote Michael Bromwich, a lawyer for McCabe, to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, who has requested McCabe testify next week. I don't think they should give him any immunity. They just say, fuck you. You used to work for us. You used to work for the government. And either you come here and testify, or we're going to hold you in contempt of court or contempt of Congress, and we're going to refer you to the FBI, and then they'll prosecute you for that, and then you'll go to jail, and that'll be it. Grassley and Iowa, or even, by the way, if he did do something criminal and then he goes and gets convicted of contempt of Congress, let's say, the FBI prosecutes him for that, or, the Justice Department does. If he gets prosecuted for that and convicted, no, he's not going to serve a long sentence, but his credibility will be ruined forever. Nobody's ever going to use somebody who refused to testify to Congress, even though he was an FBI deputy director. And, he said, I wanted immunity, but I didn't get it. Well, then we know that you did something wrong, and then you didn't want to talk about it, and then you refused to do it, and then you were held in contempt of Congress. So therefore, your word is literally worth less than groundhog shit. That's basically the way it works with somebody like that. Although they have overlooked things like that. Susan McDougal, who was Bill Clinton's partner's wife, James McDougal's wife, refused to testify, and she went to jail. And people were like, well, I guess she refused to testify. I guess, there wasn't enough evidence because Susan McDougal refused to testify over Whitewater. Maybe there was no case. Well, you don't know that because one of the key witnesses refused to testify and went to prison over it. So when something like this happens with the Gambino family, you don't say, well, I guess the whole matter with the Gambino family was all trumped up charges. Nobody ever says that when somebody refuses to testify against the mafia. Now, in legal terms, yes, that's true. If somebody refuses to testify and they're like, well, throw me in prison, then yeah, the innocent until proven guilty. Nothing you can do about it. But it ruins his credibility if he ever wants to testify against Trump. Grassley, an Iowa Republican, has quietly requested that several former officials appear in front of the Judiciary Committee to discuss the long-awaited internal Justice Department report, which sources say will detail a series of missteps surrounding the Justice Department and FBI's investigation into Clinton's handling of classified information while Secretary of State. The Inspector General's report has not yet been released, but Grassley has invited former FBI Director James Comey and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch to testify as well, according to those familiar with the plans. The stakes for McCabe's appearance, however, are particularly high. The former number 2 at the FBI is entangled in a separate criminal investigation stemming from an earlier report from the Inspector General's office that concluded he lied to internal investigators. McCabe has steadfastly denied wrongdoing, but any congressional testimony he provides could have serious implications for his criminal case. Mr. McCabe is willing to testify, but because of the criminal referral, he must be afforded suitable legal protection. Bromwich wrote to Grassley, "This is a textbook case for granting us immunity. If this committee is unwilling or unable to obtain such an order, then Mr. McCabe will have no choice but to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. If McCabe invokes his Fifth Amendment right instead of answering certain questions, it could set up a contentious confrontation with lawmakers. So he could go to Congress and just take the Fifth the whole time. They could serve him with a subpoena, and if he continues to refuse to testify, lawmakers could pursue a contempt resolution against him and refer the matter to for prosecution by the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office or enforce a subpoena through civil action in federal court." So they could just sue the fucking pants off of him and say, well, then we're going to, well, what does that even mean? I mean, do they sue him for damages? That's a good question. Bromwich's letter also makes clear that McCabe is willing to provide emails that demonstrate that Mr. McCabe advised former Director Comey in October 2016 that Mr. McCabe was working with FBI colleagues to correct inaccuracies before certain media stories were published. The discrepancy between Comey's recollection and McCabe's statements to internal investigators about authorizing FBI officials to talk to a reporter about an ongoing investigation regarding the Clinton Foundation in 2016 served as one of the linchpins in the Inspector General's earlier report finding he lacked candor. So essentially, this undermines their whole premise that they were against leaking, because typically there's no authorization to talk to reporters about an ongoing investigation. Grassley wrote to the FBI Tuesday requesting that McCabe be released from a non-disclosure agreement that prevents him from providing those emails, among other records. McCabe was fired from the FBI in March, less than 2 days shy of his retirement after a rocky final months of service. During the 2016 campaign, then Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump latched onto a report that McCabe's wife accepted it's not a report, it's a fact. She did accept $500,000 from the Political Action Committee of then Democratic Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, a Clinton family ally, during a failed bid for state Senate in 2015. So understand that most state Senate races don't need $500,000 of funding. Not in Virginia, even. Though McCabe was not promoted to deputy director at the FBI until months after his wife lost the race, Trump continues to assert on Twitter that McCabe had a conflict of interest in later overseeing the FBI's investigation into Clinton's use of a private email server, given the donations to his wife. Grassley has set the judiciary hearing for next Monday, but could be delayed, as the Inspector General's report, while a moving target, is still not public yet. Sources familiar with the report describe it as a massive undertaking, walking through the events leading up to the 2016 election over roughly 500 pages. So we'll probably discuss that next week. I don't know if I'm not going to read a 500-page report, but that'll be a big, big bombshell, I believe. Brocephus. I think Sessions is a well-placed shit stain for Trump and playing possum. You mean, how do you, it's spelled, this is how you spell possum, by the way. It's either with an O, whoops. I guess it's either like that or just, that's how you spell possum. Also, if someone fails to be granted immunity, they can still testify under the protection of the Fifth Amendment. Well, you can test not if you're in certain positions like that. If you're deputy director of the FBI or former deputy director and you refuse to testify, and I think there's different standards of the right. There's certain situations where the Fifth Amendment right doesn't cover. Bold like a leopard, why couldn't Sessions control the DOJ? How did he allow so many leaks and legal actions against Trump? He could have quashed it, right? At first, this is what happened. I think the real problem with Sessions at the FBI wasn't just him. It was also that they picked Rod Rosenstein, who was a little bit of a holdover from both the Bush and Obama administrations. And he was wrapped up with all the other people who were basically, they were Bush or Obama loyalists. Bush, Obama, Clinton. And, if you think about it, the Department of Justice has been controlled by, people who were affiliated with Bill Clinton, George Bush, or his dad, or Barack Obama since 1988. And therefore, there's very few people in the actual FBI who would have, a sense of objectivity given anything to do with Trump, because many of them owe their careers to, previous administrations. And that includes Deputy Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who I think he's one of the reasons that we're in such a mess. So if he fires Jeff Sessions, I think that eventually he'll also have to fire Rod Rosenstein. It's inevitable. And the entire department is basically just a wreck right now. Vote Red in November. Welcome to the show, but the show's over. So I have to go. And everybody have a good weekend. I'll probably be back sometime either tomorrow or Sunday. And we'll discuss what happens after now. Please like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like the video. There's two dislikes. Very, very nice. I pissed off 2 people. Was that because of the Stelter thing? Thank you. So yeah, subscribe, share, comment, and fuck off. Have a good night.